I want to jump right into a little bit of a demo here because I want to demonstrate both of those points and what's been missing for the leader and what's been missing for the leadership practitioner. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I just changed my background to some lovely some lovely fall photos now that we're in September. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, know that Mel and I are going to rejuviventure.com, our business website. We're looking to the upper right-hand corner and you'll see a login screen. And we're going to, thank goodness, use our password services. And we're going to log into the platform as an org administrator. So think of this as you're logging into the platform as a director of leadership development. You're logging in as a leadership development facilitator. And so when you log in, one of the things that you'll start to see is that there's these multiple colors. And what we would say is that this is like multiple worlds of Rejuvi. So when you're in this butterscotch, you're in the world that has all of the advanced modeling and stuff for your directors on up, for your more senior leaders. If you're in the red world, you're in the advanced modeling and all the services and support and resources for your sales leaders. Purple is for service leaders, think of account managers, and then blue is for your team leaders. Coming is green, and that will be for your expert leaders, like those inside of IT or those inside of your data units or your legal units. Now, one of the first things that I want to go to is I'm going to go to resources to go. Let me just go back and kind of explain what I'm doing here. I'm going to go back to the main login page. And when you log in and you choose the world, the advanced modeling and tools that you want to be in, I'm just going to stay in butterscotch. Here you can do some leader population work, you can do some data collection work, all your reporting analytics work, and then your training and development work with your resources. And I'm going to go into that. I'm going to go into the trusted partner folder. I'm actually going to go into data collection and analytic aids. I'm going to go into individual reporting. I know I'm moving kind of quickly. I'm going to go into some sample reports. And one of the things I'm going to preview here is a sample. You use the phrase kind of heat map. Mm-hmm. So if you were able to give people analytics, data, leadership analytics at the individual level based on the whole, what would that look like? And so I'm going to just preview a report right now. This is a report it's one of our teaching profiles. It is for, it's real data. We've changed the name of the individual and the company to, for confidentiality purposes. But think of this as data for a gentleman named Carlos Pliego. And I'm going to go to this report called the capacity heat map right here. Because this is different for people. We could go to the area that helps you to understand yourself as a leader, or you're a coach, you're helping a leader to understand themselves and their own capability. But this is the piece that helps you to understand, how do I help Carlos to actually run a stronger business? And so we start to take a look at this data, these general data points right here. And Mel, you know a little bit about this modeling, where we say it starts with strategic intent, the big picture stuff. It moves over to business unit intelligence, which is all this stuff about Carlos really understanding what's happening in the purview of his unit's role and what's really happening in the market, how they take that and they start to innovate around it by figuring out what's the right work and using that as a way to start to get into implementation and deciding how far and how fast they should go and what is the right work that's immediately in front of them. So you know this kind of basic model, but looking at Carlos's results, what can you start to already tell about Carlos and how we might help him differently?
Right. So if I'm looking at Carlos and I see 86% at implement, this is a gentleman who likes to get stuff done, right? He wants to move work forward. He's probably pushing, he probably gets results. The biggest question is he getting the right results? We
Oh,
don't
that's
know,
really, yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at his intent, right, which is probably the lowest score, well, target as well. He may not know exactly where he's headed. He's headed somewhere and he's getting results somewhere, but we don't know if it's aligned to where he and his unit then really needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that this in general is where all of what we would call the individual level leadership analytics actually begin. How we help Carlos to be kind of certain to fly. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go from his capacity heat map. I'm going to go from there. I'm going to go back to this page and I'm going to move to something called the Build to Sustain tour, which now takes those 4 quadrants and it starts to help us to understand all of the behaviors, like all of the little things that he might be doing or might not be doing on a day-to-day basis, and it breaks them apart. And you can see obviously here, it just is like, okay, wowzers, you know, this is, I like what you said earlier, he gets things done. The question becomes, is he doing the right stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do you help someone to get better if that's the feedback? Well, you can now start to take a look at all of this red on the right-hand side. Look at this. All of his weakest points are either in strategic intent or in target. You can actually map each one of these little squares, these little red, back to a behavior so that you can coach him, and you can coach him on that behavior in the context of something larger, like your ability to represent the intent of this company, right?
Right.
Or your ability to break apart and define the right work of your particular unit. It's amazing. And the analytics all start here,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely. It accelerates what's possible through this degree, this level of data. Even if we were to do another popular assessment or a 360 feedback where you might be asking some of these questions about impact to the business, it can still only go so far. It doesn't get this sort of granular to really be helpful to an individual. There's a lot of speculation and a lot of conversation and like, well, let's put together what we think this means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then try to take action.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I love about this.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about yet, but I do want to. One of the things that I love about using advanced modeling and using for our leaders at all levels and using analytics, leadership analytics for all of our leaders, is it starts to point out where our coaching might have been inappropriate in the past. So we know what Carlos's kind of, how does he run the business? We know what that kind of looks like. But in the past, we really haven't had that data. We've only had data, based on kind of competencies, which are important. It's just not the only thing.
Right.
So what's interesting here, I think, is if we looked at Carlos's competencies and you looked at this and you could still start to come up with the same sort of coaching,
Mm-hmm.
he's so green at the top and he's so red at the bottom. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're going to have that same type of feedback
Right.
called, well, okay, wait a minute, he's getting things done, but like you said, is he doing the right things? Well, what's interesting, I think, is if you go back to, I'm just going to go back the same way I went in. If you go back to Carlos's leadership analytics, his individual report, and you went back into the how does he run his business, and you go back to the build to sustain tour, that if you're only coaching him on this piece at the top, which is, implementation, you're totally missing that there is a piece of implementation that he is great at. And there's also a piece of implementation that he's not very good at. He's really, what I think is interesting about this profile is he's really strong on the left, which is all of this stuff around building a sustainable, healthy work environment. But what he's weak on is his ability to help that unit move into new territory, right? To kind of grab out and start to talk about what's next. So people probably like working for and working with Carlos, but over time they're going to get frustrated because it's going to be a stagnant group, right? They're not going to be figuring out the right work. And unless you start to understand these advanced models, you're never going to be able to figure out like the old ways of doing things. Let me go back to this, which is working with Carlos on his own leadership, which means you would look at something like this and these competencies, you would completely miss that a piece of his doing, a piece of his implementation is strong and a piece of it is weak until you start to cross-reference it in terms of how he's running the business. Do you know what I mean, Mel? I'm just like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. We become so much more, oh, you use this word in our, as we were preparing, so much more surgical.
Right. Absolutely. Right? Yep. In ways that we never could have been before, because again, doesn't matter how many certifications you have, doesn't matter if you're, clinical psychologist, the reality is you're not going to have all the context from the data points that you've gotten in the past.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
That's exactly right. So I'm looking at the time and we have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to go over this next piece just super quickly because I want to get back to some of the things that you've pointed out so beautifully, and that is leadership analytics isn't just about for the individual, right? It to help them grow, but it's also leadership analytics should support that leadership practitioner. It should support the business in helping them to understand how much leadership capacity do we have, because we don't want to just be that company that is trying to, to say, well, what was the result of this thing that we did? We want to change the conversation. We want them to say, how much leadership capacity do we have? And what difference did we make? What do leadership analytics actually look like? If this is what it looks like for an individual, what does it look like for a business? And I'm going to go back to the trusted partner folder inside of the resources to go section of the platform. And to go fast, I'm going to type in the word playbook. And we're going to see this thing called a modern leadership capabilities playbook. And I'm just going to preview it, open it up. And this might just take a second because it is a larger file. I'm going to open up this particular piece right here. Now, this answers the question called, what do leadership analytics look like for a leadership practitioner? What do leadership analytics look like for a business? And I think what I love about this is that, it goes to this kind of input process output model. And so what happens is in this first part of input, you're starting to see all the synapses that we just saw in Carlos's report, right? The synapses that made him strong. And we knew he was really fantastic at the top. The synapses about how he runs the business. We knew he was really strong on the left, but needed to do some work on the right. We're going to take all those synapses and we're going to give a leadership practitioner the ability to run individual reports. We're then going to give them the ability to run Delta reports, because Carlos is going to do a point in time measurement. He's going to get some feedback. He's going to get some training. He's going to measure again. Then you can run your Delta reporting. And what that does is that Delta reporting allows a business to take all of this fantastic data and not take that data and go compare it to industry norms through a vendor, which we call off-ramping, right? That's not certain to fly, right? That's
Right.
certain to understand how you're doing in the context of everybody else. But what you
Yep.
are going to do is you're going to stay in your lane. You're going to stay in the highway. You're going to take that data and you're going to start to understand what is our credible rate of change in our leadership capacity. And you're going to put it into, Video Thumb Ready calls this the gonculator, right? You're going to put it into the gonculator where now it's not leadership analytics, but it's advanced analytic tools that help you to understand not only correlations, but more, like you said earlier, what are the causations? When we experienced a credible rate of change at this level, in this little part of the synapses, we're working with Carlos in this section over here. When we grew that by 3 percentage points, the gonculator is going to help us to understand what happened to your business's people-based KPIs like turnover. You know the drill here. What the operational KPIs, the value KPIs like market capture. This is what leadership analytics actually are for a business that are driven from leadership analytics for the individual. It's an absolute game changer.
It absolutely is. It's one of the most exciting things I've seen. Oh gosh, I don't know, maybe ever in this industry, and
Yeah.
trying to figure out how do we actually help businesses. I mean, my goal is to help grow leaders and grow business, and it's not a either or. It's not, well, if we do this, then the other one wins. It's together. And
Mhm.
so this is the first set of capabilities I've seen that actually looks at this whole picture and
Mhm.
throws the old models out the door.